Kevin, welcome to the show, my man.
Oh, Larry, so good to be with you. Very, very good to be with you. I'm looking forward to this.
Me too, my friend. Dude, so you're into all kinds of different things. And it seems like you were actually going in a direction that I don't know if anybody else is with your programs and the way you help married couples, how you help individuals, how you help families. What you're doing is pretty exciting stuff.
Oh man, I so appreciate it. You know, it's funny. You step in to help an individual with an individual problem and you realize, wow, I wish that when I struggled, it was just me. It didn't affect others, but it does. But the other side of that coin is incredibly encouraging, which is if it works that way, it works the other way. That when I'm struggling, those people can help me struggle better, can help me improve. We think too narrow about how to get better. Like I need to go see a therapist. No. A lot of times it's a podcast, it's a book, it's a conversation with somebody else that gets me moving or a little bit higher perspective on my relationship. And the one that really matters is that close one, that spouse, that other.
Well, marriage is a big deal on this show, man. We talk about it a lot. And the funny thing is, well, it's funny, not funny, but like there isn't really a whole lot of resources out there, or at least there's more now than there ever have been. Right.
Yeah.
But if you really think about this from a generational standpoint, you know, your crash course on a successful marriage is what you saw growing up, right? Maybe a book or two, something like that. But when it came to the fundamentals, to the skill set, to the communication, partnership, friendship, the intimacy, I mean, the whole 9 yards, did I even marry the right person? We've changed so much. I don't even know who she is. I don't know who he is. These are the conversations we either might be having out loud or maybe quietly, right? So
yeah.
Before we get to all your experience and all the work that you've been doing, real quickly, how did you even get into this?
Oh gosh, man. Okay. Here's the sad but enjoyable part. I just went to college like any other dude. I mean, I go to college, all sports and dating. Well, I'm bad at math. And so I remember telling my advisor, look, I'm not good at math. I like working with people. And like 8 years later, I look up and I'm finishing school with a doctorate in psychology. I'm like, wow, I hope I like this. Fortunately, I love it. And that's seriously how I stepped into it. And then the more I worked with people, the more I realized I love learning and I'm curious. And I didn't realize how much I wanted to be the best version of myself wherever I was, whether that was as a husband or a dad or a psychologist or a CEO or whatever it is, that I just want to get better. And to your point, I don't like self-help books, never have. But what I love is reading and listening from other areas that speaks directly to it. That's why, I love your podcast, because if I'm a dude trying to figure out this relationship, I need data. I need information. And I got two sources. This other person, my wife, who I'm kind of either mad at or upset at, or we're in a difficult spot. Who's the other expert? Well, not some dude at my gym or coworker. They may, but they're just a dude. What qualifies them? And so I love podcasts being a way that we can get more information about how do we do this well? Because like you said, I have one thing to look at. My mom and dad, how did they do? And I probably have a few things I want to do, some things I don't want to do, but that leaves out so much. So I love the conversation.
It does leave out a lot. There's a lot of skill sets, man. A lot of skill sets when it comes to marriage. And here's the funny thing. You mentioned something in there, 8 years of education to get your doctorate in psychology, right? Now, if you think about I can't even imagine the amount of hours. I mean, have you ever calculated the hours? What are the hours, do you think?
Oh my gosh. That's just sitting in a class. Then you do an internship and all that. I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't know that. And oh man, it is a lot. It is a lot. But like you, when you step into an area, and you find yourself just all in because you love it and it's making sense and it's connecting, you don't realize how much you've traveled, which is good.
That's true. Yeah. But the analogy that really comes to mind here is the amount of time you spent perfecting your craft. And when you talk about couples, right? I know you treat individuals and, kids, adolescents, all those things. We're talking about married couples. Yep. But when you think about marriage, how much education do we have in marriage? We literally walk down the aisle. And even if we voice like, wow, like, I'm not really sure what to do. People pat you on the back. They give you a hug. Like, oh, don't worry. You figure it out. Best time of your whole life.
That's great. You guys, and it is great.
It is
good. We figure a lot out, but you're like, okay. Because I've been with my wife, holy cow, married 30 something years together. We've been together and married 35-ish years, also known as a long time. And I would love to tell you, I said this to a couple the other day I was working with. I'm like, listen, I just need to be clear. You're going to make the mistake of thinking because of all my training and work with couples, man, I bet this guy's great to be married to. False. Because I step home and I have the same things everybody else struggles with in that relationship. And it's funny how the emotions, and it's the most unique of all relationships, can be the most rewarding and the most terrifying at the same time. And how do we figure it out, the nuances of it? And how can I be more aware? And it's hard to be aware when you're in it, right? So like COVID, you take that as a great example. You're in COVID as well. And so you're talking to all these people like, hey, how are you doing? And you hear about the struggle and you're like, gosh, I'm struggling. It's hard for me to move because I'm part of this story. And that's what I've talked with people about. And you think about the marriage part, you go, no, it's hard for me to see me and my wife in the way I need to so that we can be successful in solving whatever this problem is, whatever this hurt or misunderstanding. I got to be able to see this to solve it.
Yeah. So, and do you think most people don't see what they need to solve? And maybe we're blinded by things like emotional resentment, things like we were just like, I don't know, I'm just angry. Like, I'm just angry. Like we're not even like and I'm not a trained psychologist. You might be looking at me like, dude, you're an idiot. Okay. Like that's the most ridiculous thing ever.
All that means is it took me a long time to sort through all that research to get back to where, no, yeah, you're right. It is that simple. No, and that's the thing is if you want to be the best version of yourself as a man in whatever your role is, okay, what does it take to do that? You're going to have input from somebody about what you do well and what you need to work on. It's if you ever think about it, professional athletes, musicians, entertainers, why do they have coaches? Why does that guy have a pitching coach? He won the Cy Young. Well, why does he? Because that person sees them in a way that they can't see themselves. So if I'm going to be the best version of me as a man, as a husband, as a father, I desperately need this woman to help me see that. And I don't care if you're at home or at work or on your podcast. Like, hey, I want to get some podcasts on. I want some feedback on how I did. Well, Larry, honestly, on that one, you talked a little more than the guest, and they were saying something. You kind of interrupted them. You're like, hey, okay, well, it's hard.
Wait, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't interrupted you.
Was that one you listened to? What are you saying? Right, because it's you feel it.
Yeah,
and you're like, okay, but. What you got to tell me, do you hate the way that feels more than you love getting better? Right? So do you hate hearing things you're not doing well? Do you hate that more than you love getting better? And I'm like, I just made a decision. I'm like, you know what? I love becoming a better version of myself more than I hate feeling that way. Because I feel bad when I hear her tell me something that I either did or didn't do. And I'm like, gosh, dang it. And so I think that's huge. And we're never going to see everything. And sorting through, yeah, that's me, or I think that may be you. Honestly, okay, I hadn't thought about this. January, my wife and I had one of those conversations. You're like, I hate having them. I don't care what I do for a living. It's just like, it's one of those conversations when it lasts 3 days. I can laugh about it now, but what I'm most thankful of is we did it really well. Because I said some things and she said some things that we both were just curious, going, okay, you see something, right? That's core beliefs. I believe she sees me in a way I don't see myself. That doesn't mean I'm wrong. It doesn't mean I'm right. But what do you see? Because we're trying to solve a problem. So you see something. This is what I saw. And if we can just be curious, and set aside the emotion of I'm hurt or I'm sad or I'm afraid. If I can just be curious and we can talk about it, then we're going to have more data than if we had this emotional interaction. And that's why it was, again, it's 5 months later, it's easier for me to laugh about it. But man, it wasn't enjoyable. It was hard, but it was also incredibly beneficial it gave me some insights, gave her some insights she wasn't aware of. And then the third piece, it gave us some insights about this other thing that we started creating before we created Little Humans, which is this relationship. And that's a separate thing from me and from her.
You know, one thing that's really emerging for me as you talk about this is the cost that's associated with this, right? And I'm not talking about money, or I mean, you could talk about money cost. Let's talk about it in a couple different containers, right? Let's talk about emotional cost, right? Emotional cost is like, well, if I get feedback from her of where we're at, oh man, that might cost me like my ego, my confidence. Like maybe I don't want to hear this thing. But at the same time, the ROI is, well, now I know where we're at, right? And now I can do something about it. And then there's a cost to doing nothing and not having the conversation and not having the critical conversations, right? The cost of that over time. What's the cost of that over time emotionally, right? Like how much emotional resentment is going to build up if that doesn't happen. The other thing too, is you talked about coaching or counseling. Like, listen, back when I got married in 2003, I was definitely one of those guys, man. I was like, no counselors. Nope. Absolutely not. Because that means I didn't say it this way, but deep down in my soul, we have a problem. We are broken. What are people going to think if they know we're in counseling? We've only been married a year now. And there was that emotional label cost to me. Like we have if we're sitting in these chairs, the cost is, number one, we're paying somebody, and the cost is we have a problem and we have this label. Now, I mean, obviously I'm on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. My wife and I have been married for 18 years. We've got a great marriage, but we hit road bumps. We hit speed bumps. And now I'm like, as soon as we hit them, hey, you want to go see Dr. Tom? Like there's a cost of not doing anything. And that really sucks. Let's go pay this guy $150 for an hour of his time. We sit down and we walk out of there and we know exactly what to do.
Yes.
Like, hell yeah, sign me up. Let's go. Right.
I know.
Yeah.
Gosh. Not that you need someone with a doctorate to go, yes, and yes, you're right. But you're spot on. And I'll start from the last thought and move back, which is I hate that we talk about counseling or therapy the way we do, because we create this hurdle. When the reality is we actually do it in a lot of other areas. Athletics, performance, you see all of those folks have coaches, all of them. And business people, executives, they often have coaches or consultants. And you go, well, why is that? What are they trying to do? They're trying to get better. That's all a psychologist or a therapist is going, okay, you know, we're too close to this. We've tried to untangle it. Can we get your thoughts on it? What am I missing? What is she missing? What are we missing? Oh, okay. And if we thought about it like that, we would be in such a better place, because we have this misperception, and that's mainly due to our emotions and fear always. But we have this misperception that, oh my gosh, this is so problematic. We're so far apart. And you're like, I love watching how quickly couples come back together when it feels like they're miles apart and thinking about separating. And I see it all the time. And it's just a statement of emotion and how important this person is. And we're afraid of that. We both love it. It brings us joy and also fear. Nobody and nothing terrifies me as much as the thought that that woman won't be home when I go home today. I mean that. Nothing. I can deal with everything else. That thought, oh God, I don't even like that thought. So let's go to the second point, the cost of nothing. The cost of doing nothing for our physical health and just eating and not doing anything actually shortens our life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The cost of doing nothing in this relationship to address those things we need to address. And I don't like it any more than you do. And I do it for a living. I don't like it mainly because it's me and my house and this, and you're like, ugh. When we do nothing, the emotional, relational toll is astronomical. And the thing that people fail to realize, and I hate saying this to couples, is that it takes two to get married, but it only takes one to get divorced. And if you don't address those things, it doesn't matter how much you love and desire and want. If you've neglected it or haven't done it for this long, that other person may decide they don't want to, and there is nothing you can do. And so I think being mindful of that, I think it helps us. I don't want to have those conversations. And if I had to be candid, since it's only you and I, Larry, if I had to be honest about that conversation in January, I kind of knew. We all know. We know when we have to have one of those because we're dudes. We're like, oh no, oh hell, she's. I was worried about it. I didn't know. I didn't want to have it. I can't remember who started the conversation, her or me. But I knew one of the things that was pushing me forward was it only takes one to leave this. And I do not want to take for granted or neglect, or I don't want to look back and say, yeah, I was afraid, to just ask a question or to have a difficult conversation. And that's what I would encourage people with is, look, just have a difficult conversation, because I'm sorry they didn't tell you. They didn't tell me either. Marriage is a never-ending series of difficult conversations. But the more we do it, the better we get at it. And we see the results of it. Like 18 years, you're like, oh, man, I'm at 30-something, but I don't think about it. I always think about, oh, man, it's like, what's the sales? You're only as good as your last sale. I always think, man, I'm only as good as our last discussion. I'm only as good as the last time I accidentally or intentionally hurt her feelings. I'm only as good as how I repaired that, how I corrected that, how I sorted through that with her. And that doesn't mean you sit around and talk about your feelings all the time. I do not do that. Nobody likes doing that. We only do that so that we can enjoy life together.
I want to talk really quickly here. I want to get into the psychology. I'm selfishly curious, but I also think this question would highly benefit the audience. Let me ask this. Man, I feel like in a way, like I've been dying to ask this for like 5 years. Okay. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. So you work with clients. I work with clients. I work only with men. I don't work with couples. I work with the man side of it. And here's what I've noticed, right? A man or a client or a patient will come to you and be like, doc, this is what's going on. Like, this is what's going on in my relationship. It's like, and then you explore, and then you understand what the dynamics are. And then you get a plan of action together. Right. And then they're like, and they don't say it like this, but they're like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And by the way, I don't think I'm going to come back. Right. Or they give up on themselves. And the thing that fascinates me is and it doesn't happen often, but it happens often enough, I think, with people. here's my theory on it. And I would love your professional theory because mine might be way off, is that are people just too terrified? They're like, what if I try and it fails? Is it more comfortable for me to live in this maybe steady state drift where it's definitely not what I want, right? And it's not what she wants. However, what is the cost of if I try to elevate this relationship and it goes nowhere? What is that failure going to feel like? Is that what it is?
I think, God, such a good question. Because you go, okay, so when they, and I do see some men individually, some women individually, do a lot of couples. But when it comes to those most meaningful of relationships where we are the most candid about our hopes and dreams, sometimes our failures and setbacks, the thoughts we never share with other people, we share with them, and they do the same. And when we start to struggle, it does resurrect a lot of our own insecurities, fear and worry, certainly being big ones. I think that's a piece of, I go back to the misperception. We gauge whether or not we're going to step into this and is this worth it? I think we too often base that on emotion and not some thoughtfulness and logic, right? Because when that relationship gets disrupted, it automatically kicks that emotional piece off, even if you're not an emotional person, or if you just settle in at anger, which is the default setting for men. You go, yeah, I give you anger, but it's also something else, sadness, hurt.
Anger is a secondary emotion, right?
Yeah. I'm like, okay, look, I'll give, yeah, that's legit. You're mad about that, but what else are you? Sad, let down, whatever it is. But we have to settle some of that emotion to go, okay, do I really believe it's possible? Am I really, and then the other thing, am I really all in? Am I really committed to this? But that gets to your beliefs. You talked about it earlier. If I keep thinking I picked the wrong person, then, I just need to pick somebody else. Okay, it's not who you picked. It's who you're becoming, but it's also who they're becoming. And you don't get a lot of say-so in that. You can't mandate it. You get to influence it. And stepping into those discussions, because they involve emotions and relationships, it's harder for us to quantify where that's going to go and where it's going to turn. And we humans hate that kind of uncertainty. And so if I step in to have that kind of difficult conversation with my wife, I don't know where it's going to end. Going back to when you look at the COVID experience, one of the things that was the most horrendous for humans, for all of us, was, I don't know when this is going to end. And we can't stand that. It's really agitating to us. But that's not on a subject that's that personal and close to us. Then you take one that's personal and close, like this relationship with this person, man, it's now uncertainty from like one of the foundational pieces of my life. And we'll never say it. I never use the word scary, but man, that's kind of scary.
That's absolutely terrifying.
And I just cut you off like I told you not to do. No, I think about it. It's funny. I've got a coworker that's going to Alaska. And so we're talking about bears. And I've been in Colorado a lot, been around bears. And you always know, hey, if you see a bear, don't run, right? Because then you look like prey and they run. Well, first time I ever saw a black bear, initial reaction was it started backing up. And you go, wow, that's that powerful. Even though I knew, just stand your ground, and not in a bad way, just stay and have the conversation. And I think if we're not careful, that can be our approach to these things as well. And you go, no, just stand your ground, just stay and have the conversation.
Kind of a funny joke, has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but like, do you ever wonder, like when they find a mauled body from a bear, like what if that guy stood still? or play dead, right? Like, what if these rules were made by bears, right?
Yeah, we don't really know if we think that rule's the way to go, but we have a real skewed sample. We don't know how many stood still and got eaten.
Right. It's very true. Like personally, I don't know the ratio. I've never dove into it of how many people have actually played dead and then survived, or people have played dead and you just never know. That is totally off topic, by the way, but really funny.
Could be helpful for your hikers that are listening to the podcast. I'd say finish the hike, then listen.
Yeah, man. Kind of a funny quick story about bears before we dive into this stuff. Just give the audience some chuckles. But I was in Montana for a speaking event, and I've never been to Montana, so I did some hiking through Glacier National Park, and so I was in Whitefish, which is a really small town. And I go to this gas station, get a bottle of water, and dude, there's this dude behind the counter, right? And he's just like, and he could tell I was not a local. Like, he could just tell. He's like, where you from, man? And I'm like, I'm from St. Louis. He's like, there ain't no bears in St. Louis. I'm like, yeah, there's not. He's like, where are you going? And he knew where I was going because the gas station was right before the entrance. I was like, I'm going to go hiking. He's like, you got bear spray? I was like, no, I don't. I was like, do I need some? He's like, boy, you better go down 2 blocks and get you some bear spray. Them bears are out there. They're done hibernating. They're out there making babies. They're protective. They will eat your ass, boy. Let me tell you what, right now, go get some bear spray. He was dropping F-bomb after F-bomb. This is a public gas station. He's behind the counter. There was a woman working the counter right next to him. She's like laughing her rear end off. There's people behind me. They're all laughing. I'm like, all right, sold. I'm going to go buy some bear spray. Yeah. I was like, so I got curious. I asked this guy, I was like, what do I do if a bear actually comes up to me? Like, do I spray him? He's like, man, that stuff goes about 30 feet. You better spray him and then run for your damn life. That bear will eat you up, boy. It was okay. So we're here to talk about marriage, but
you're like, oh,
I'm like, yeah,
that is, I've made my first trek to Montana last year, and yeah. That's like solid. He has distilled that down to really the essentials. Yeah. And you're like, yeah, I'm going to get some of that stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to go get that. Thanks.
I'm going to thank you.
He actually asked me, he goes, do you have a gun? I was like, no, I traveled here. He's like, dude, like no one in this town hikes through Glacier without a can of bear spray and a big gun. He's like, without those 2 things, you don't hike. And I'm like, all right, great. I mean, I'm never going to be found.
Does he talk about marriages and how dudes can do it well? Because I like how he does not candy coat it, man.
I mean, maybe the bear spray might help marriages. I don't know. It might be something we just didn't discover. Anyway, let's talk about this. I read these statistics in a book. So 50% divorce rate, right? 50% of couples that stay together, they're divided up into 3 camps. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. 1/3 of couples that stay together can actually say, hey, our relationship's actually really good. Like, it's kind of everything I wanted. It's good, right? There's a middle of the road camp, another 1/3 that's like, it's okay. It's not everything I wanted, but it's all right. I don't want to break up, but definitely I would improve things. And then there's the third camp, which emotionally, physically, mentally just checked out, waiting for the kids to move out. 2 reasons they don't break up: finances, kids, and they just ride it out until the kids are out, and then they're out. Now, I think it's important to, number one, know those statistics. Yep. And if you're in camp 2 or 3, let's take camp 2 for an instant, for example. What do you usually see as the number 1 or number 2 thing that divides a couple from having a great relationship, the things that they've wanted, to like, it's all right? What are the common themes?
Yeah, first, people conceptualize it different ways, but there is an element of luck. I always say it's not who you pick, it's who you become. But there are some folks that either their past or their history or just their personal struggles in life make it extremely difficult for them to step in. That's just a reality. And those folks do sometimes, they do marry and end up in camp 2 or 3 mainly, sometimes in camp 1. But let's assume that's not your situation, because that's not the majority. I think some, and we've talked about it several times, is this mistaken idea that I either picked the wrong person or they're not doing this or they're not doing that. And I think at times we expect them to give us or provide us or do for us in ways that are just not realistic. I work with a colleague that I just really love. This guy. He's about 15 years older than me. And we were talking one time and he goes, yeah, my wife is 93% perfect. Right. I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah. He goes, it doesn't matter who I'm married to. There's a percent that has nothing to do with her, right? There's just things that she does that I don't care who it is, any woman, there are going to be these aspects to her. And I don't focus on that. I focus on how perfect she is in the majority of this relationship. And if we're not careful, we look at the small percentage of things that irritate us. And you go, okay, well, stop trying to change that. Maybe stop thinking and focusing on that. What if you focused on what's there that you love? It's a little bit like if you've got guys that listen that are in the business world, first break all the rules. Buckingham and those guys talked about hiring for talent. And one of the things they say is, look, it's hard enough to bring out all the talent. Don't try to repair what you're not good at. And you've probably done that in your career. And you're like, look, I'm not good at math. I'll never be good at math. I'm going to focus on what I'm good at, but I'm going to make sure that my math skills don't hurt me. And I think we have these notions and myths about marriage that don't serve us well. And when we realize, no, there's a percentage of me that I don't care who I'm with, it's going to irritate this woman. All right, well, I want to minimize that as much as I can. And this myth that we're going to get to a place that we don't have these discussions anymore. No, life is so dynamic. I mean, you have your life together, then you've got career, then you layer on, if you decide to have children, you decide to get a house, you have a mom or a dad that takes ill, or somebody gets a diagnosis. I mean, it continues to throw things at us, and our ability to shift and repair and change is critical. But do you have beliefs about life doing that? Because if you believe that if we worked really hard, we get to a place where we can just put it in cruise control, that's not marriage. It's not it's not a realistic expectation. And so the thing I see most of all is this idealizing what's out there and in this other person. And the majority of the time, it's just a way to escape difficult conversations. Because there's not, if you want to live with somebody the rest of your life, you're going to have challenges. I mean, if you were in college or after college and had a roommate, was it really seamless? Or did it kind of irritate you the way they did dishes? Yeah, or the remote, seriously.
Dude, true story. I had a college roommate. I know I keep telling these crazy stories, but I had a roommate. He was a cool roommate freshman year. I came back to the dorm room one day and we had this chair. It was the nastiest, like 1970s orange chair. And our beds were lofted and our desks were underneath. And we had like this chair that was right in front of our tube TV, right? There were no flat screens back then in the 90s. Yeah. And the deal is that if the other guy was out of the room, you could chill. And we called it the King's Throne. We actually took a Sharpie black marker and wrote the King's Throne on this piece of crap chair.
Genius.
Right. And so normally I was in class and we had opposite schedules. So he was always in the chair. One day I came back and I was like, oh man, the chair's empty and he's not here. So I sat there, I was watching TV and I took my left hand. I'll never forget this. And by the way, if you're in the audience and you're eating something right now, don't eat. And I took my hand, I just like rubbed it up against the side of the chair. And I was like, what is that? Like, what is that? Dude, I looked down, true story. There was like 30 boogers.
Oh,
yeah. Oh. I'm like, what in God's name? I wrote, we had this dry erase board on on the outside of our door, like
Mm-hmm.
kind of like code, like, hey man, busy in here with my
Right.
But I was like, I told him, I was like, dude, here's cleaner, wipe this shit off my chair. Right. It was disgusting, but yeah. Right. Other than that, we had this great relationship. But yeah, you're right. Yeah. You're not going to be married to something. Now boogers are extreme, but like you're not going to be married to someone where there's not going to be hiccups. Right.
But yes. And I don't know why we think differently about those relationships than we do our buddies. I mean, some of my best friends in life that I'm still connected with, we'll get together every year a couple of times. We still get irritated at each other, but we also value the relationship. All that we've done, the good far outweighs this. And you know what? Maybe that was my fault. So I'm just going to be curious about why we just got in this argument and cussed at each other, but we're good 5 minutes later. But it's not an expectation that won't happen. And I think at times we think that shouldn't happen or won't happen in marriage. It's absolutely going to happen. It happened with your buddies in college because that whole chair incident, that's like, hey, dude, we're having a conversation.
Yeah.
It's not okay.
It's not okay.
Yeah. I don't expect you to agree. I just expect you to go along with this plan. We're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What do you say to people? Let's talk to people who have been married maybe 7 years or less. Mm-hmm. We've got a lot of young guys who listen to the show. What type of advice would you have for them in the first 7 years? What do you do? What do you expect?
What I would say is, tell me anything you've achieved that didn't require a sacrifice. Anything. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's athletics. I don't care if it's academics. I don't care if it's job. I don't care if it was running a certain minute mile or climbing a mountain. What you tell me something you accomplished that was meaningful that didn't require a sacrifice. And by sacrifice, I mean less sleep. No, you can't eat that. And now I can't go to that because I gotta get this done. All great achievements require a sacrifice. You may not have fully realized that because you were like, God, I think she's really good looking and I'd love to spend the rest of my life with her, which was basically 90% of my decision for my wife. Back in the day, we weren't that thoughtful. I mean, people now ask way too many questions. I'm like, stop it, get the basics and then step in and become the right person. So if you're in that 6 or 7 years, you're like, look, you should expect some challenges. There are going to be things you didn't know, things she didn't know. That's okay. That is okay. But are you willing to suffer? Because the achievement is worth it. And the achievement of doing life with somebody is incredible. Absolutely incredible. But I say that 30 something years later, but it feels like a very different answer than it would have 15 years ago. And that's because it's been seasoned over time and I've seen it pay out. That I've been lucky that I stepped into it with this curiosity to be the best version of myself as a husband and as a father. She did as well. That was one thing that we both kind of got on the same page of and talked about. And that, look, I don't see me the way you do, and you don't see me the way you don't see you the way I see you, but I want to do that in a way that helps you become that person. And you go, okay, not that we do it all the time, but that's our commitment. That's bedrock. And you go, if you do that, you will have far more joy and wonderful life experience than you will sacrifice and pain. Far more. And if you don't, you're doing something wrong. If you don't, you got some life skills you got to backfill.
Man, that is such good advice. You have this theme of growing together. And there's also a couple other themes that you've sprinkled in here. Curiosity was one. Mm-hmm. Appreciation was one, right? Focusing on what it is, the things that could be versus the things that were not. Right. So there's definitely, and what types of thoughts come to mind when I say quiet expectations?
Yeah. That if you want to have the marriage you think you want to have, then you've agreed to a long game. It's a long game. And if there are things I desire that aren't currently in this relationship or with my wife, and I feel like we've been able to have a conversation that was curious, where she heard me, asked some questions, not that she agreed, not that she said yes, but that she heard and listened and we talked, man, I am mentally in such a different place. And the expectation for change for some behaviors is much longer. And we have to be fair. We have usually two standards of change. The one I have for me, which is really long and very understanding, and the one I have for you, which is by tomorrow and not understanding at all, right? And you go, okay, well, that doesn't seem logically consistent. If I keep saying, be patient, I'm working on it, and then I expect her to be different the weekend, you go, hey, by the way, that logic doesn't seem fair. You know what? Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. So if I've signed up for this and she's been curious, man, I'm actually okay if she doesn't completely shift or we don't start to have that element. If I know that she's heard me, she understands, and I see her continuing to think about it over months or whatever, just by little things, or, hey, yeah, I thought about this, or I saw that. You're like, okay, you do care. You did hear me. Because when we don't, then we start to make up a story. She doesn't love me. She's not in this. And you're like, ooh, don't go down that path. So when you say quiet expectation, that's what I think. And man, hold on loosely to all expectations, because you don't want to turn those into a pop quiz, right? People can't stand when they're being given a quiz, they don't know about it. That's just not fair. That's bad for relationships.
Are you talking about unexpected, tough conversations?
Oh, no, we should expect that. But if I'm quietly expecting her to be mindful of this and I haven't had that conversation, you go, well, that's not fair. She didn't even know. So, but we sometimes do that. Mm-hmm. You've never, and you go, you never told me. I didn't know.
Communication. Yeah. And that's actually where I'd love to wrap up in the final segment here is communication. Like, what is that? People will always use two words, at least when I've, in my experience working with them. And those are the words, more and better. I want more communication. I want better communication. And then in my experience, and I'm sure yours might be the same or maybe different. If you ask somebody, well, like, well, what does that look like? Sometimes they really can't even describe what it is that they look like. They just want better than what it is today. But what does good, healthy communication look like?
Yeah, it's funny when I think about, God, do I want, and I really, man, I'm so fortunate. I absolutely got lucky. I've tried to work hard, but man, I just married to an amazing woman. Having said that, I don't want more communication. I'm a dude. And I'm not sure I want better communication. What I love is meaningful communication. I love that because it's efficient. It also reflects, I've listened, I know her, I've heard and seen her. I've been curious about her, not making up stories. Just when, hey, when you said that, what were you thinking? Or why'd you ask me that? Not in a defensive way, but no, I mean, what made you ask that? Why now? What? And it's those meaningful conversations that I don't need to have a lot of them. Man, they last. And most of our communication, we get hung up on the superficial facts of it. Skip that, man. Just plunge right into, hey, what's up? Why do I feel like we're really distant in this, or you're really angry. Help me out with that. I'm kind of curious. I feel like you know what I mean? And that's not, hey, you said this, or I thought I told you. You go, no, that we spend, it's like we burn all our jet fuel at that thin layer that doesn't matter. And then when they say, well, no, I had counted on you being there and you weren't. And you're like, oh gosh. So that's it. Why did we waste 2 hours arguing about text when that was it? Regardless of who said or what was said, you expected something and you felt let down by me. Even if it's my fault, man, I'm sorry that you felt that way. I really hate that for you. It's like, why are we reluctant to apologize when it's the right thing to do? Well, we think it's going to weaken no, just keep doing the next right thing. Skip the details and go with, wow, why are you so upset? It's not the detail. Oh, you were exhausted and counted on me to help you, and I wasn't there. And I'm really sorry. I didn't realize how tapped out you were. That's the heart of it. That's not the details of, no, I texted you and see, look, I have couples do that in my office. I'm like, put your damn phone away. If you want to keep doing that, I don't need to watch. I literally said that 2 weeks ago to a couple. I'm like, no, it's not about that. What's the problem behind the problem? Because the problem is not what you said in text. The problem's behind it. I needed you and you weren't there. God, I missed it. I'm sorry. That is a meaningful conversation.
Do you think we get hung up? You mentioned the text message right there. Do you think most couples just get hung up in like these mundane things that they're fighting about? But it's always a deeper problem, right? And
yes.
Do you think that most conversations and most disagreements even go into a direction of like, wait a second, for the love of God, what were we even fighting about?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what, when you study couples, that's what you would find. And when you look at difficult conversations, hey, what's up, buddy? How you doing?
I didn't even see him over there.
That's awesome, man. How's it going? This is good stuff. You came in at the right time.
Yeah, man.
So most of the time we get hung up on those little facts and details. But when you look at the data, most of our arguments are about things that are subjective. I thought, I felt, my perception. You go, well, if that's the case, there's not a right or wrong. So let's skip that and get to the meaningful. So we got to get to the meaningful and not get hung up in the details that don't really matter.
I love that, man. It's really just stick to exactly what it is that the problem is, right? Get to the root of the problem. Get
to the problem behind the problem. The problem is not what you texted and what I promise you. Because I see people fact find all the way through. I had a guy insist on doing that, really successful guy, and he insisted on doing it. I just watched it all unfold. And he did it. He turned out to be right. And I looked at his wife and she looked like a plant that had not been watered in 2 years. And I was like, hey, tell me something. And I pointed at her and I said, do you really feel that good about being right when that's the result you've got? And I made him just sit there. And I'm like, and she was at that point was crying. I'm like, wow, okay. Because the problem behind the problem was what she was hoping for or wanting or needing from him. Okay, well, get to that as quickly as you can. And it's the problem that's behind the problem. That don't burn your resources on the details. We're not in court. You're not trying to get out of a speeding ticket or you ran a stop sign. You're trying to problem solve the most meaningful of relationships in your life.
Man, I love this. So we talked about, I just want to make sure I recap some themes here. I'm going to bounce these off of you. Tell me what we missed, but understanding that this is a journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also understanding that we don't necessarily have to question, did I marry the right person? It's more of a question of, am I becoming the right person? Right?
Yep.
When it comes to solving marital issues, both have to be in agreement that that's what they want, because you mentioned that if one person's like, yeah, I'm kind of done here. Like it's not going to happen. Right.
Oh.
Yeah. Communication, definitely themes of creating psychological safety. Ownership was a big one as well. When you're wrong.
Yep.
I noticed in there, and I'm sure you're very used to this, but there were certain choices of words in there that you, like when you role played things that you would talk about with your wife, there was a tone in your voice.
Yep.
And I know you're trained, but like, even when you ask like, oh man, like you didn't even use the word why. It was, tell me what's going on there. Right. Which I think is brilliant, because doesn't the word why kind of put us into a corner a little bit? Like, why do you feel that way?
Do not ask questions that you can get an I don't know or yes or no. You need information to solve this problem. And here's the yes, and yes on your summary. Be curious, appreciate all of the good, because the majority is good. And if you really want to be the best version of yourself, if you can get your wife to agree that that's her goal too, man, it is. Now when you communicate, if I was talking to you and we're trying to play a card game, I would talk to you in a way that I'm explaining the rules, right? Because I want to make sure you get it. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of the strategy on how to do it. Because what's my goal? I want us to play.
You want to play?
I want to play. So when you're trying to talk about something difficult with your wife, that's how you should talk. Not, I see this, you don't. It's like, no. I got to talk about this in a way and with the right tone and the right words. We have to be impeccable with our words. And if I can do that and I can talk like that, then she'll play, which means she'll talk and she'll ask questions and she'll wonder, and then hold my feelings at bay and just go, okay, I wasn't aware of that. Or no, that's actually not what I was actually thinking. And just say it, even when it's worse. Actually, I kind of was mad at you. I was like, forget her. And I hate, it's so petty of me to have thought that, but you asked me and that's the honest answer. So yeah, those are some of my last thoughts. And yeah, they're simple, but they're really hard to do with the person that means the most in the world to you.
Well, you said it right there, the person that means the most to you. And it's such an emotionally charged relationship. There's so many factors in there. There's love, there's vulnerability, there's authenticity, there's ego, right? There's so many things that are at stake. It's like, sometimes it just boils down to the fact that like, you don't know, I just don't want her to call my baby ugly. You know what I mean? It just boils down to just simple stuff like that. It's just like, oh, I don't want to hear the word no. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
So, well, I know you got tons of resources to help not only married couples. This show is focused specifically on marriage because I know, just judging by all the feedback that we get on the show, marriage is top of mind for men listening to the show. It really is. Parenting too, right? Mindset, all those things. But men are keenly curious about marriage. But I know you also help adolescents. You help men individually. You help women individually. You've got some really cool resources, and I want to give you some time to share what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, no, I so appreciate that. Yeah, well, I'm at Innovation 360, which we're here in Dallas. We do outpatient work, like you said, across the gamut of things we struggle with a lot with marriages for all the reasons we've kind of touched on. You can track us down here, I360 Dallas on the web, on Instagram, I360 Dallas or Dr. Kevin G. And then also a podcast, Struggle Well, Live Well, and Worry Less, that, really busy minds can really unravel us. They also can have a really terrible effect in marriages. And so that's really the main focus of that podcast. But yeah, there's a number of different places people can track us down. And man, I'll go back to something you said, which is, hey, look at it as coaching. If they're that important to you, go meet with somebody that sees them a little bit different, that can give you and her and y'all some things to think about that you hadn't thought about. It doesn't mean the rest of your life, but man, a little bit of information might be all you needed.
I love it, man. We're going to have all your links in the show notes. So guys, don't even worry about that. You won't have to look far to connect with Dr. Kevin. This has been awesome. Some of the things that we even talked about today, I was rewinding in my mind, 18 years ago. And I was like, man, think of the trouble and the frustration and the banging my head up against the wall. If I would have had just this one conversation before marriage, it would have been like, because here's the funny thing. When I was getting married, I was terrified to ask questions of how to be married, because I thought in a way, I was like, oh man, well, if I ask, like, I must look like an idiot and not knows what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But, but none of us know what we're doing.
None of us. And I even went to school for a really long time. And I'm like, wow, where do I apply that? Or how do I do that? Right. Or golly, if I could go back to that naive dude in the 80s and just go, man, just be curious and solve problems. That's it. Because it doesn't matter who you're with, you have to do that. So, and yes, it is absolutely worth it. Absolutely worth it.
Yes.
And if for no other reason, I am such a better version of myself as a man because of that woman. No question. And that I didn't see coming and love it. And so thankful for it.
Very cool, man. This has been so helpful. Gentlemen, if you found this show helpful, hey, podcast is free, but there is a charge. We ask you to share it. If you enjoyed what you heard today, and maybe you know a friend that might need to hear some of the strategies that Dr. Kevin talked about today on today's show, we ask you to share it. You can find everything, all the links for Dr. Kevin and everything we talked about today. Go to gooddadproject.com/324 for this show. This is our last Monday show of June. So next Monday show is going to be in July. Pretty cool stuff. So this is the end of June. 2021 is already half over. Pretty crazy stuff. So again, gooddadproject.com/324 for this show. Make sure you check out the Q&A on Wednesday. And hey, we're not doing Thursday Throwdown anymore. We're doing Fierce Friday. So make sure you check out our show on Friday as well. Dr. Kevin, this has been awesome, man.
Oh, man. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
You too.
And so greatly appreciate what you do, because no, not everybody needs therapy. But man, if you're a dude wanting to be successful in these relationships, you definitely need information, including myself.
That's right, man. We all do. We all do.
Absolutely. Yeah. We do.
I have one final funny question for you. It has nothing to do with bear spray or boogers on chairs, but I do have a question for you, because my wife does this to me. And not that I have an 8-year degree, but I've been in this space helping men and have some certifications in coaching. But does your wife ever look at you and be like, I know what you're doing. You're a trained professional. I know exactly what you're doing. I know your MO. Don't use your Jedi mind tricks on me. Does she ever do? I'm sure she doesn't talk like that.
Yeah.
But does she do that?
It would help if she did. That way I'd know, ooh, she's on to me.
Yeah.
God, it's so funny. I think I quit trying to do that when I realized how far she saw that coming. I was like, wow, it's like a bad hanging curveball. I'm like, oh, I'm never seeing that ball again. So yeah, I've quit trying. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to pretend like I don't know a thing. Yeah.
And there is the Jedi mind trick, maybe, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Because, let's be honest, women got a head start on us when it comes to a lot of this stuff. So
you're kidding, man.
Yeah, man, it was good to be here, Larry. I love what you're doing.
Back at you, man. Gentlemen, again, gooddadproject.com/324 for this show. Go out and live legendary. Take care.